So today I'd like to talk about um, a translation of Sir Orfeo into modern English by J.R.R. Tolkien. This um, this this is a preliminary study, so I'm going to present some of the methods that I've been using and kind of talk about some of my findings. This originally came about as result of me looking for um, a translation of Sir Gawain and the Green Knight. Um, I originally studied Sir Orfeo, and Sir Orfeo is just over 600 lines. And I did it all in the Middle English, and I did present a video presentation earlier on Sir Orfeo. It's not that interesting, but check it out on my YouTube channel. Um, but this study came about when I was looking for translation. I really needed one of the much longer Sir Gawain and the Green Knight, which is, uh, in my opinion, a more difficult Middle English. And so I came across one in modern English uh, by Tolkien. And I actually don't know much about Tolkien except for his movies, and I have read parts of his books. I've never um, been a real fan. However, I do respect him, and I didn't really know that he was a professor at Oxford, uh, that was his main job um, before he got famous. So he did uh, publish a modern English translation of Sir Gawain and the Green Knight, and packaged with that was Sir Orfeo and Pearl. Uh, so I was interested in Sir Orfeo. So taking a look at it, I'd already finished Sir Orfeo. I'd finished my project and I'd moved on. But just looking back at Sir Orfeo, I was really kind of confused about what I was reading in the modern English, and I didn't. To be honest, I didn't really like it. I read Sir Orfeo in the Middle English uh, with a side panel gloss with definitions of some difficult words. Uh, so looking at uh, Tolkien's translation, reading it, it just wasn't as interesting to me as in the Middle English. However, uh, when I was thinking about a project to do, a final project to do, I kept thinking about Tolkien's translation and, why would he spend so much time translating these? And uh, the more I was thinking about it, the more questions came up. So I decided to look at Tolkien's translations of Sir Orfeo, Sir Gawain and the Green Knight, and Pearl. However, it's too ambitious a project, so I cut it down to Sir Orfeo, and this is what I found. So I did a line by line analysis of Sir Orfeo, which is an anonymous Middle English Breton lay published probably in the late 13th century or early 14th century. And I looked at it alongside two modern English translations. Um, One I already mentioned was Tolkien, and that's the main interest. The other was just kind of a random translation I pulled from the internet from Harvard University's website. And it's a translation by a woman in 1920. Her name is Jessie L. Weston. So I'm going to present some questions I had, my methods, and some results and early conclusions. So this title is called Sin and Salvation, but I just want to look at can I see influence of Tolkien's Catholicism in his translation? As I've learned more about Middle English and as I've learned more about Tolkien, um, uh, he was uh, his mother converted to Catholicism when he was 8 years old, uh, and these I'm not Catholic, I'm not really religious, but in studying Middle English, you know that uh, the ecclesiastical influence is omnipresent. So I want to know, um, how does Tolkien's translation um, kind of show his Catholicism, and also what does his translation say about other themes in Middle English literature? One of those would be like sin and salvation. Um, because this is a preliminary study and I'm still working on it, I'm hoping to uncover kind of a common theme in his translation, and I'll write about that later. Talking about my methods, I use the text by Lescaya and Salisbury. It's from the Medieval Institute, and it was published in 1995. It lists Sir Orfeo from the main manuscript, which is I forget how to pronounce it, but it's um, the yeah, I don't have it here, but I'll write it in the text. And I compared it, like I mentioned, with Weston and Tolkien's translation. In an earlier study, I had divided Sir Orfeo into 22 sections based on the line indents. So I looked at, I already have a good idea of kind of the themes of those 22 sections of Sir Orfeo, but I've kind of, in this study, I've kind of ignored those themes, and I'm looking at each section anew with a line by line analysis, uh, a word by word analysis, actually, comparing all three texts. And as you can see here, this is a copy from my textbook, from the Lescaya and Salisbury text. And the black box is one section. You see the arrow, it's pointing to the number 1, and the 24 represents how many lines. So what I did when I first studied this lay or poem, basically a lay is a spoken poem. So I'm just gonna call this a lay. When I studied this lay, initially I counted each line of each section and gave it a theme. And you'll see on the next page, you'll see the theme. But this was the first section that I studied, and there are 22 total. And you see on the right side, you see the gloss, which gives definitions for some of the difficult words. And this is the line indent that I used to divide the sections. Looking at the next page, you can see more clearly here. The arrows are pointing to some of the kind of keywords that I'd written when I did the first analysis. And like I said, I've ignored those basically in this study. So this is the on the left side is the Weston text, which can be had from Harvard's website. And on the right side is a Kindle edition of Sir Orfeo from J.R.R. Tolkien's Sir Gawain and the Green Knight. You can see here that the arrow is pointing to the second line. And in Tolkien's translation, it says, "As learned men do us remind." So when I went through this, I looked at each section as a whole. I read each section, and then I also read each line. And I read each line and compared it to each version in the modern English. And when I got to the second line, I noticed some differences. And one of the reasons I did it this way is the influence of the textual analysis that I've been learning in some of my other studies, and how useful it is to look at how differences between poems really shed light on kind of what the author was thinking, or the poet was thinking. And in this case, I'm not looking at the same author, but looking at just some differences between them. Really, word by word differences sheds a lot of light on, what Tolkien was thinking. So looking at how Weston translated this line, she said, "As ancient clerks give us to wit," and coming back to yeah, and you see learned men there. So ancient clerks um, and learned men; these are um, two different ideas, uh, and we learned from the Laskaya Salisbury text in the Middle English. You can see the line there that clerks means scholars. So Weston, uh, and I'm seeing this throughout, is Weston kind of sticks in most of the time sticks closely to the text of the Middle English and doesn't change it much. But what I'm seeing with Tolkien is just in the second line, you see already that instead of writing about clerks or scholars, he says learned men. And this has a little bit different nuance for me. Um, and he also, let me show here. This is divided out. Uh, you can see the three versions. Um, and I noticed that, in Tolkien's, he says remind. Um, so for me, this is much different than the original, and uh, is kind of shedding light on what he was thinking. This is some of the data that I collected, um, and this is just the first section. You can see across the top of my Excel sheet, I have the section, which there are 22 total. This is just the first one. Um, line and theme, um, Sir Orfeo, which is the Middle English version, then the Weston 1920 version, translation into English, modern English, and Tolkien's modern English translation with kind of some comments. So um, you can see that in line 2 here, you can see there. When I was going through the line by line, I said that Tolkien's learned men made me think of wise men. And later on, there's a part that also brings me back to this theme of the wise men. Uh, so remind also tells me that something is either conscious or unconscious, something in our memory. And this isn't in the Middle English at all. He translates, Tolkien translates line 5, war, um, into wheel. And I'm having a hard time finding out what wheel means, but it means wealth or well-being in the Old English. And uh, where I think Tolkien is influenced by Weston is Weston later on in line 24, she uses the word wheel. And this word wheel is not present in the Middle English. So I'm not sure, in my opinion, I'm not sure why he uses this. Of course, it depends on the rhyme. Sir Orfeo has a rhyme scheme, so it could be because of that. Uh, but I'm not quite sure why this would be translated like this. And you see in the Sir Orfeo Middle English version, you have war and grief, whereas Weston translates it into bliss and heaviness. So, you have two negative images, war and grief. Weston has bliss and heaviness, kind of contrasting images. And if you look at wheel as being wealth or being, Tolkien has a similar kind of positive and negative juxtaposition here. So looking at some of the results, I believe that Tolkien's translation seems to be shaping some kind of theme that gives us insight into what's of interest to him, and in this case, his very devout Catholicism. Uh, Also, he seems to have been influenced by Weston's translation. And I've also learned that he made his own Middle English version of Sir Orfeo, and that from this Middle English version of Sir Orfeo, he translated into modern English um, the version that I'm using here. So this would really affect how I would look at this. So anyway, thanks for watching.